It takes over 24 hours for Filipino fisherfolk from Quezon Town in the province of Palawan to reach Rosal Reef in the West Philippine Sea. For bigger ships like the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources BRP Lapu-Lapu and the Philippine Coast Guard's BRP Cabra, the reef, located within Recto Bank, is just half a day's voyage away. For the Chinese, it takes several days from their coast to reach this part of the West Philippine Sea. Yet it takes no time at all for two China Coast Guard ships to show up on April 4, as 25 Filipino fishing boats and two Philippine government vessels visit Rosal Reef. Rosal, or Iroquois Reef, is just over 140 nautical miles away from mainland Palawan, which means the Philippines should have the exclusive right to enjoy the bounty of these waters.
BRP Cabra MRRB 4409. Ilocos Reef is 141 nautical miles from mainland Palawan, Philippines, a traditional fishing ground from Filipinos, fishermen, and part of Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf. You are state party to UNCLOS. Stay clear from our passage in accordance with the collision regulations. Over.
Despite the radio challenge from the Philippine vessels, China Coast Guard ships cut across the paths of the Lapu-Lapu and the Cabra and sail close to the much smaller bangkas of Filipino fishermen. It's been over 9 hours since the mission started, and still you have two China Coast Guard vessels still trailing us. There's one here and another here, 21551. The other ship, the vessel here actually, nag-dangerous maneuver siya kanina lang. Dumaan siya dito sa harap ng BRP Lapu-Lapu. The crew and passengers of the BRP Lapu-Lapu and the BRP Cabra are also on alert, after CCG personnel appear to position themselves in front of the bright red water cannon of their vessels. But no water cannons are launched during today's activity. The Philippine Coast Guard has reason to be on high alert. After all, their Chinese counterparts aren't above using the force of their water cannons. They have harassed Philippine missions in Ayungin Shoal and Scarborough Shoal, features also located within the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone. PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore J. Tariela, says it only goes to show that what China wants is to stop the Philippine sovereign rights, no matter where in the West Philippine Sea. China claims almost all of the South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea, which includes the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone. Beijing ignores a 2016 arbitral ruling that favors Manila's position and affirmed its 200 nautical mile EEZ.
In this specific context of the South China Sea, our interests are clear. They lie in ensuring that the universal and unified character of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and in the final and binding determinations of the South China Sea Arbitration Award of 2016 are firmly and consistently upheld.
In summits and speaking engagements abroad, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. speaks of the rules-based order and the importance of keeping peace in the South China Sea. Partners and allies like the United States back the Philippines' rights in these waters. A U.S. military plane flies around the area during the activity, although the PCG says they didn't coordinate with the U.S. for this to happen. And days after the pile-laying activity, naval forces from the U.S., Japan, and Australia joined the Philippines for joint drills in the West Philippine Sea, including parts close to Palawan. That's welcome news for many Filipinos, including Palawan fisherfolk. But the reality they deal with now is this: China's constant patrols in our own exclusive economic zone. From sunrise until well beyond sunset, BFAR, PCG, and Filipino fisherfolk lay down the payaos where fish gather and multiply amid the unwelcome presence of China Coast Guard ships 21551 and 21556. In 2 or 3 months, fish should already be plentiful. The payaos are government issued, and their coordinates will be shared with other Filipino fisherfolk too. The China Coast Guard continued to harass and block even the most civilian of missions, like this one in Recto Bank, to install fishing devices. The president and his men have repeatedly promised the Filipino will not yield. Because when we talk about sovereign rights, this is what we're talking about. The right of Filipino fishermen to enjoy the bounties of the West Philippine Sea without fear of harassment. 2 days later, most of the 25 fishing boats are back in Quezon Town, where many rely on the sea for their livelihood. Rodel Cabuena has been fishing for over 25 years. He says it's been getting harder and harder to eke out a living. Margins are slim and he needs to venture farther out to sea for a bigger catch. Recto Bank is among the nearer options. He is quick to admit that they're afraid of harassment from Chinese vessels, be it the China Coast Guard or Chinese fishermen aboard much larger fishing vessels. So far, harassment has come only in the form of close sail-bys and unwanted photo and video surveillance.
Siyempre naman, nakasanayan na rin namin na hanggat wala silang ginagawa na pangharas, hindi na naman kami itigil ng pangingisda dyan. Yung namin, pag nagpangharas na sila, dyan na kami hindi na kami pabalik dyan kasi kami kahit may isang bangka na harasin nila, matatakot na ang lahat na bumalik. Yan lang namin na hanggat wala nanghaharas sa kanila, pabalik at babalik kami. Hindi na kami nangingisda, hindi na kami nagkakuha ng kabuhayan namin.
Installing the payaos is only the beginning. It'll take a village to monitor the payaos and make sure the hours spent on April 4 will pay off in the coming months. Tariela says fishermen themselves ask that the PCG, BFAR, and the Navy increase patrols in the West Philippine Sea so that at the very least, fishermen like Rodel feel a little less alone while they're out at sea. Filipino fishermen are quick to admit that they do fear Chinese harassment out in the West Philippine Sea. After all, their smaller bangkas pale in comparison to the bigger ships of China, especially the Chinese Coast Guard. But they still fish there because their livelihoods depend on access to areas like Recto Bank. But their biggest fear is that one day, one of their own actually gets hurt as a result of the harassment. Rappler, Palawan.